Hey there, everyone. John here, and welcome to the False Takes podcast. This is episode 7, which is pretty cool that we've been going that long. And this is a podcast about art and film and the mistakes we all make along the path to creating something new. As you guys know, we have a special guest every week, and this week it is Mark Belcher. He is a set lighting technician out in Los Angeles. So, wave hi, Mark.
Hey guys.
And then we also have Doug Miller co-hosting with me again. He knows Mark real well, and he, should be able to ask some very interesting questions. So we'll see where that goes. But other than that, first off, let's just go ahead and get started. Mark, we always ask a question to every guest on the show, and I never tell the people that I'm going to ask it when I do.
Sneaky.
But it is sneaky, but I like it. It's fun. So, Mark, what is your most overrated movie?
Most overrated movie.
Mm-hmm.
Ooh. Is this like from a historical perspective or a recent perspective or?
Oh, you asked a follow-up question. No one's done that yet. So basically, this is a movie that you decided, or that everybody says, you know what, that's an amazing movie. We love it. It's the most amazing movie ever. And you watched it, and you're like, it's fine, I guess.
Well, I mean, I guess, I don't know. From film school, I'm just thinking I was sorely disappointed with Citizen Kane when I saw that. I find
You're
it
not the first person to say that.
I find it very historically important, but not necessarily something that should chop a top 100 movies chart. So,
all right, there you go.
There you have it. That's my takeaway. So
somehow I knew he was going to do that. Somehow I was sitting here going, when he said historical, I went, he's going to say Citizen Kane. I know.
Yeah, you know me too well.
Yeah, so. There you go.
All right, so Mark, you're a set lighting technician. You've been out in LA for a while. Tell us a little bit about what you do, who are you? What do you do? How long have you been in LA? What does a set lighting technician look like? Go.
Okay. So my name's Mark. I have been in LA now, I think it's a little over 4 years now. I'm a member of IATSE 728, which is the set lighting union out here. And I work kind of on a range of different projects. I work as a set lighting tech on some network TV. I do some smaller stuff as a chief lighting tech and some medium-sized stuff as a best boy or assistant chief lighting tech. And the job responsibilities range depending on the project and depending on the budget. But that's a little intro for you.
Okay,
cool.
I've got a couple questions for you.
All right, I'll let Mr. Miller take it.
You're not originally from LA?
No, I'm not originally from LA. I grew up in Virginia Beach, and I went to film school out there and actually started working in the Virginia market for a number of years. And then, I don't know, one day I decided I wanted to change. So change of scenery, change of pace. And
how was the transition?
The transition was I was lucky. I was very lucky. I knew a lot of people in LA. Actually, before I moved, I'd made a spreadsheet of all the people I knew in all the major film markets in the US. And I found I knew more producers in LA than I even did in Virginia, which I found very surprising. So when I moved out to LA, I hit a bunch of my contacts up and I was able to make the transition much easier than many other people.
Now, how'd you get to know more people, more producers that were LA based than Virginia based?
What was this? 2014, 2015, and then into 2016. I'd been about half of my work, half of it was local, just through people I knew, and half of it was all kind of off classified ads that I was, finding producers who were coming into town, shooting small pieces. At that point, I had started building a grip and electric van package and kind of a rental business, putting that together. And so I was meeting these people who needed equipment, they needed a gaffer, they needed a crew. So I would come in and supply some of those needs. And I ended up, meeting a lot of people all over the country that I've, try to keep tabs with. I try and stay in touch with as many people as I can. Not every day, not every month, but when it's appropriate. So
that's the reason I asked. We talk about networking a whole lot, and that networking is key to being successful.
Oh yeah.
But that can be kind of abstract. So thanks for describing how that went about, because you put some meat on the bones of what networking is.
Yeah.
Just for perspective, when did you graduate from college?
I graduated. I walked in 2014, but I finished up school December of 13.
Gotcha.
But it's interesting because I was working significantly in the film. I actually was an intern in the television business before I went to film school, and I was working in film and television pretty much the entire time. Maybe the first 2 years, not so much. I kind of focused on school, and then junior, senior year, I kind of thought about not finishing film school because I was like so busy doing film stuff. I was like, why am I spending money on this? But I figured make my parents happy and actually get the degree. So
now, something I know about you that a lot of people don't, you're very good at math. You tutored folks in math when you were in college, didn't you?
I did, yes.
So with a strong STEM background and a strong math background, why did you do film?
I found it interesting. I don't know. It was like one of those things I kind of stumbled into in high school, and there's, at least as a technician, there's an interesting blend of, there's some creative elements. There's some, I don't want to say high level math, but there is some problem solving and, some mathematics that are involved with different things. And if you're just a pure technician, you're just going to be schlepping gear around. There's no thought whatsoever into it. But as you kind of get to the point of like, working as a gaffer, for instance, you're working with, light ratios, but you're also working with power calculations. You're working with budgets. You're working, and you're trying to find ways to, create this certain aesthetic that the cinematographer wants to achieve. But then you have all these, technical ramifications that you have to take into account. And I don't know, I find balancing those two things to be fun. So
thank you. I wanted to hear you say all that. That was very good. Are you what's the next step for you? Where do you see yourself going?
That's something I've been trying to figure out myself, to be honest. The past year, I've kind of, maybe year and a half, I've taken a little bit of a step back from just pushing forward and trying to focus on other non-film related things right now. That's probably where more of my focus is. I was telling John before the podcast started, I've started, trying to learn Spanish finally. I've been traveling a lot more, camping, hiking, exploring national parks. One of the things that kind of occurred to me a couple years ago is you can get so caught up in the rat race of just trying to get on a bigger project, move up the ladder, and you can really end up spinning your wheels if you're not careful. And I'm not saying I'm not doing that, I'm not progressing forward, but you have to have some balance in life. And that's kind of what I've spent the past bit of time focusing on, is making sure I'm grounded in other areas of my life.
Now, if I remember correctly, you've done some traveling recently. I mean, over the last 3 or 4 years, you've traveled some pretty interesting places.
Yeah, well, it's funny, actually, right before the pandemic, I went traveling for a couple months, actually. But
where'd you go?
Yeah, I was down in Mexico, and then I was out in Australia. So doing some scuba diving in both places, and was at a surf conference out in Australia, which was a lot of fun. And it was kind of funny. This year was actually going to be, so last year for me ended up being a lot of work. Just ended up getting tied in with a really cool crew, and we just went from project to project to project. And this year was going to be a couple projects, some more traveling, couple projects, some more traveling. And then what do you know it, the world goes crazy, and we're all just sitting at home now. So
There you have that.
So going back to you going out there and you're going from being in school. I know that you freelanced in Virginia Beach for a little while in the East Coast area, and there was a van that I remember you building. Tell me about the van, and tell me about kind of what that did for you, and how that worked out.
So the van I bought from a friend of mine who had an event lighting business, and the van was old when I bought it from him, and it continued to age as I owned it. But the van was interesting because I would meet these small commercial clients who would come into town or who lived in town, and they would need, to make any sort of a film, you need equipment. So as I learned what equipment people like to work with and also what was affordable to actually purchase, I would buy that stuff. And what I found is, and I want to be really careful in saying this because this is not necessarily true, but if you know how to behave yourself on set and you know how to light a scene, especially in a smaller market like Virginia Beach, owning your own equipment gives you an air of authenticity where you're not just some rando showing up, that's gonna sling a couple things around. In a small market, it gives you a bit more leverage to get jobs, where producers don't want. There's not really a rental house in a city like that, so they need somebody who can provide stuff also. So they're also not going to hire some dude who doesn't have access to anything. Now, in a market like Los Angeles, it's very different. Having your own stuff is not necessarily a point of authenticity in a larger market where gear is easily accessible. So it really just depends on the culture of the market you're in.
So then talk to me then about what the transition was like from that smaller market to Los Angeles, because I think a lot of people watching the show would be going from maybe a smaller market to either trying to get into something like Atlanta or New York or LA or something like that. So talk to me about that transition, and what were some of the hard knocks that you had, some of the things that kind of shocked you a little bit, and what are some of the things that went well?
So the one thing I will say the van allowed me to do was like when I was living in Virginia, it gave me an alternate revenue stream, which is still important, even in a larger market. And it allowed me to meet a couple DPs who were very influential in helping me get established out here. So I took that van on a job down to South Carolina where I met one of the DPs who I work constantly with now out in Los Angeles. She happened to be out there working on a job, and we hit it off, and she told me to hit her up if I ever moved to LA, and I did, and we've been doing quite a number of projects together ever since. And the other job that I was able to get was, and Doug, I think you remember this, I had two jobs at the same point. One was going up to DC with my van to do a dock job, and one was to go fly out to Missouri without my van to gaff a tiny feature.
I remember.
And I don't know, something in that moment. Both of the jobs, by the way, I had found off of a couple different websites, like you were asking about earlier, John. So I knew nothing about either group. The DC job was that was actually for CNN documentary films, I think. It was actually a real job. It was paying significantly better. For whatever reason, I had the inclination to take the smaller job. So I ended up renting my van to that production, sent one of my buddies up to go do that job, made more money off of renting the gear to the CNN job than I did doing the indie feature. But doing the indie feature allowed me to meet the DP who was able to help get me in the union very, very quickly within moving to LA. So it's networking is a funny thing. It's not always you never know what's going to hit and what's not, but sometimes you get lucky.
The lesson there is also, it's not always what job pays the most. Sometimes payment is long-term and different than just dollars and cents at the end of it.
True. I will say 90% of the time the money is
Important.
I mean, it is important. And the one thing I will say that is, if you are in film school and you're coming up, people will promise you things they can never deliver on. I did a bit of a background check on this particular DP and saw that he at least knew some of the right people to potentially come through with some of the stuff he was claiming. But you'll come across people who will say, promise you the world, and they just have no possible way of coming through.
I remember a story, only because you called me and talked to me about it, but also people promise and say that they have equipment that they don't really have, or the quality of the equipment they have isn't what they claim it to be until you get on the job. Can you talk about the variation in equipment?
Well, I mean, we run into that out here all the time. I only rent equipment from people that I know or from reputable rental houses, just because the maintenance of equipment can range so greatly. I had a friend who was doing a different indie feature, and the producer said, "Oh yeah, I got gear coming," and it showed up, and it was 20% of what was promised. And I actually, on that same indie feature in Missouri, the producers arranged for gear to be transported, and it was the wrong stuff for the job, for one. The guy didn't even have a truck to transport the gear around in. He had a tractor trailer just parked somewhere and a stake bed to move it around. It was a total joke for where we were at because of weather conditions and all of that. But then it was like, I opened his trailer up, and like his banded cable didn't even have cam locks on it. It was just bare wire. I looked at
what's a cam lock for people that don't know?
That's just a heavy duty power cable. So
it's a connector.
Yeah, it's a connector. It just didn't have any plugs on it, basically. So I'm sitting there in prep, putting plugs on his cables that he's supposed to be providing to us. I'm like, what are you doing, dude? Are you crazy? I don't have time for this. Go get some cable. Like, go back to where you came from and get some real cable, please. Thank you.
Was that the job with the questionable HMI?
Oh yeah, that's one where I opened an 18K up and just pieces started falling out of it, and
yikes!
Half of his lights didn't turn on. Yeah, it was a thing. It ended up being a thing so much that this person was getting like a producing credit on the show, and it was kind of funny. They ended up letting him go. I went to the head producer. I was like, "This is not working. This is not working at all." So they were getting the stuff for free by giving him a producing credit, and they ended up just going somewhere else and paying for better equipment because it was unworkable what we were having to deal with.
Yikes. Well, yeah. So do you have just speaking of working in situations you may or may not have liked, do you have a favorite project that you have done since you've been out there? And what did you learn from that project? How did it make you better at your job and what you wanted to do?
Favorite project. I think I mentioned to you one of my favorite ones was getting to gaff all the reenactments for The Innocent Man for Netflix, which was a docu-series about 4 men who were arrested back in the 80s under dubious circumstances. 2 of them have been found innocent. 2 of them are still in prison. But I found that to be, I really enjoyed that project a lot. That we had some night exteriors in the woods where we got to put a condor up and really do some fun lighting with that. We also traveled to Oklahoma and had the challenge of trying to blend a you know, the crew that I work with, which was me and a key grip I work with, and and we had to meet some locals, and within a couple days, build a couple sets in the middle of Oklahoma and make it happen. Sight unseen. So that was a fun but interesting challenge, and I was really happy with how that project turned out. It's a fun one. It's one I'm happy to have my name on, I guess you would say.
Cool. So what did you can you talk about any of the challenges you ran into?
Uh, I would say like the biggest challenge that always comes back to get me is budgets. Um, Budgets. Oh yeah, that's right. With that project,
I like,
we
oh yeah, that's right.
yeah, I forgot. So we had an issue where, and this is why this particular project was not associated with the union, and this is why we tend not to. I don't like sending PAs to go pick up equipment. So on this particular project, we're flying out to Oklahoma the day before. I think we added a day of shooting. I can't remember, but there's a PA that went to go pick up some stuff that we were going to have in Oklahoma because there just so happened to be another movie shooting in that town that had all the equipment in town. So we were going to have to fly the majority of what we needed out there, and we'd never been out there before. So I got a list. They went to the rental house, and it wasn't too terribly much stuff, but it was, a specific list. And there's a lot of quasar tubes, and they reversed the dimensions at the rental house. So they did not send us enough short ones, and we were going to have to hide a bunch of short tubes in various places. So we ended up having to like get more tubes overnighted to Oklahoma because they couldn't end up flying with us. It was such a crazy thing. And I guess the takeaway from that is, always, A, don't wait till the end of the day to send somebody to go pick something up like that. And B, send someone who knows what they're looking for, and not just somebody who's going to,
have a list.
well, and knows what the list means.
Yeah, well, it's not just have the list. It's you got to know what the list means.
Yeah, exactly. So, I mean, sometimes you don't have a choice. I mean, on a lot of the bigger stuff out here, we do have rental houses just drop stuff off to us, but they're all the rental house drivers know what the equipment is, and they know when it's missing, and they're all really good about it. There's a professional way to do drop loads, and then there's
Not.
Yeah.
Talk to me.
That was a little out of my. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say that one was a little out of my control, just with the circumstances of the, production. But whenever you can, insist on.
You keep using the word professional or doing things professionally. What does that mean to you, and how do people not do that on set? I guess because a lot of people I think are just getting started on set and trying to figure out, okay, how do I operate effectively and properly in this department or that department. What does that mean to work professionally, to be professional?
That's a good question. I would say, at least within the set lighting department, it's know how to move. Yeah, like, so if you're working as a set lighting technician, if you're moving lights around, I'll just give an example because, I mean, professionalism encompasses many different things, but it's kind of the way you carry yourself and work with others. And sometimes, corners do have to be cut because of budgets and certain things. But like if you're a set lighting technician and you're moving a light on set, you should always be collapsing the legs. If you're walking a light around with the legs all spread out, hitting people in the shins, that's not a professional way of working on set. And very likely if you come out, and if you work with several of the people that I tend to work with, you might not be asked back if you do that consistently. You'll probably be told, hey, first time you'll be told, hey, don't do that. But then if you keep it up, you're not going to be working with the guys I work with because that's not how we like to operate. So, what else? If you're working as a tech and you bring a light into set, and if it's like a light mat and it has a bunch of pieces that have to be plugged in, generally speaking, you should have those pieces plugged in before you bring it in front, near the camera. If you're sitting there fidgeting with a bunch of wires in front of the crew, you don't look like you really know what you're doing. You look like you're being haphazard. And so professionalism has like an intentionality to it, to where you know what needs to be done, you're doing it before it is asked for, and then when you do certain things, it's hard to say exactly. Professionalism, it's not like a do this, do that, do this, do that, but there's a consistency to an efficient way of working, a clean way of working, a courteous way of working with other people around you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you talked about getting stuff before people ask. Anticipating, at least in my experience, has been huge in terms of getting somebody to want to hire you again, because if they don't have to ask me to do something and I just do it, that's like huge.
Yeah, well, one of the crews I work with, at the beginning of every day, we build the 10 most common lights we use, and just get them prepared, ready by the carts on stands. Have a couple, short stands ready to go. Have a couple C stands ready to go, so we can switch them out real quick. But it's all about, if you're working as a technician, it's all about prep. The first half hour of the day, the gaffer shouldn't have to tell you what to do. The carts that normally have to come off the truck. He might tell you, the HMI cart, we need that today, because you might not use the HMI cart every day, or you might not use the specialty par cart every day or something. But like, at least for us, there's like 5 carts that get used every single day. So those 5 carts come off the truck. The 10 lights that we use consistently get built, and he doesn't even have to ask, because we just know that's part of the job. And then when he calls for, the light mat 2, he shouldn't have to wait for us to, put the grid on it, put the power supply on it, all that. It should just be done so it can go straight in to set. That's part of professional working in the set lighting department.
I have a follow-up question for you, Mark.
Yeah.
So both John and I work with students, and they're looking at transitioning from being a student to being a professional. Tips on how to learn this stuff, because I'm sure they're all going, how the heck do I learn this? What is there a book? Can I read it?
Yeah, and I'm going to tack onto that, because that's actually one of the questions we have in chat is, what resources would you recommend for beginning lighting technicians when they're first starting out?
Oh man, that's a tough one, because half the stuff you read in the books is not going to apply to. Yeah, like you can read a book, but working on set is almost more of a street smart kind of thing than it is a book smart kind of thing. I would say the best way to start is, you're probably going to start out as a PA. You're not going to start out in the lighting or grip or makeup department or whatever department you're actually trying to get into, at least for a short period of time. And as a PA, you can watch what the guys are doing. And the trick here is you have to watch guys who know what they're doing, which there's a lot of guys who have bad habits. So, hopefully you get on like at least a medium-sized set to where you can watch what the guys are doing, and hopefully they have good practices. And some guys are all right with questions. Some guys aren't. You just kind of have to read body language. If you want to ask a question about something, try not to make it something, for lack of a better term, too basic. Try and think to like level 2 if you can. But a lot of guys are open to questions, but watch and observe first and just see, okay, these guys, at the beginning of the day, they're always pushing these things. They're always setting them up this way. They're always doing this. So then when you get the opportunity to jump into that job, you at least have some of the practices. You've observed some of the practices that you can try and mimic. And then when you do get the chance to do that job, don't act like a know-it-all. Be ready to listen to instructions and do it the way, the other guys on the crew ask you to. You're probably, when you first start working as an electric, if that's what you want to do, you're going to work as an additional guy who's there for a day and might not be back for 2 weeks. That's just the nature of it. You're going to be the additional. So make sure you jive with the team. A lot of this job is how well we get along with you. It's not even, we can teach you how to how to carry equipment around in a way that doesn't bang into walls. That's pretty easy. what we can't teach you is how to be friendly. We can't teach you how to be enjoyable to be around. So just be a good person.
What would you look for if you were hiring a PA who was just up and coming, and you were looking to fill that slot? What's the person that's the most attractive to fill that spot with? What are you looking for if there's like one thing and you can boil it down?
Okay, well this gets into this is a hard question for me to answer. I actually get asked this question personally, from like friends of friends, and the trouble for me is I am not in a good position where I am at to hire someone who is at an entry level. It's not. Yeah, I've got a list of 40 dudes I'm going to call who are in the union before I'm picking up somebody who's even not in the union. Like I think last year we had one permit day. Last year we were super slammed and we were super thin on the roster, but I was only able to hire one non-union person the whole year last year. So at that point, if you're going to be a permit hire, you got to come in knowing some experience. This is talking, from a union level.
I think that's an important note. What is a permit hire? What does that look like?
That is when the union has run out of union members to hire for anywhere in Los Angeles, then they allow you to get permission or a permitted hire who's not in the union to fill a position. And that's how you get your days to join the union, is to get one of those permit slots. They're pretty hard to come by. But what was I going to say? So you end up having to cut your teeth on some smaller projects and develop good habits. And then when you get around better people, you just start learning better. You never get to be the best right away. I'm still not the best. I'm still learning things from other guys I'm working with. One of the nice things during this pandemic is the union has had a lot of conference calls with a lot of the top tier gaffers where, those of us who don't know as much as them can listen to, hey, this is how we did it on this show. This is how we did it on this show. This was our workflow. And you never stop learning in this business.
I want to back up just a second because there are some folks who are going to get on sets as PAs and they're not even sure what a good PA is. So, and I know I'm sure you could describe what a bad PA is. Talk to me about PAs, about the good ones and the bad ones and the ones you would never hire on a non-union electric kind of deal, even if they really told you they wanted to.
Again, it comes down to work ethics. So are you on time? This is a funny one, and this is actually a real factor. Are you on time for work? If you get stuck in traffic one day, hopefully it's not your first day, but after you've been working with a crew, maybe they'll show you some grace, maybe they won't, depends on the crew. But if you're consistently late, you're not gonna make it very far. Are you looking for the next thing to do? Or are you standing around waiting for somebody to yell specifically your name on the walkie to go do something? If you're being proactive to say, hey, or just knowing what's coming up next. You can look at a call sheet, you can look at sides, you can look at where the cameras are looking and be, okay, the cameras are looking out this window. There's a pop-up tent that's my department's responsibility that the cameras are looking at. Maybe I should ask if that's in the shot instead of waiting till the last minute. And then the script supervisor's like, why is that tent in the shot? Just get your stuff out of the way. Don't be that guy. So
well said.
But it's all about being proactive. I mean, there was a job I was on a couple years ago where we were on the lot and we would come back to the same set every week, multiple days per week, and we'd be in the same kitchen, same living room, same bedroom. And I could, me and some of the other techs could look at the call sheet, be like, okay, it says kitchen day. We use these 5 lights for kitchen day every time it says kitchen day. So, we're not going to bring them into the set before the gaffer calls for them, but we're going to have them right outside the wall. Instead of having them at the carts, we'll put them on the back of the set wall. So that way, when he calls for it, it's literally an arm's reach away instead of 30, 40 feet away. And that's, as a PA, if you're in charge of lockups, if you're in charge of whatever your responsibility is, you should be looking for it, not waiting for the second AD to specifically assign you a new task.
We've been talking a lot about what it's like if you're a person who's in the electric department and you're working with the electric department with the other guys in it. The flip side of that question, is there anything that you would want to tell anybody from any other department, or like what would other people in other departments benefit from knowing that would make your job easier that are not in the electric department?
Fortunately, I'm pretty lucky in that I usually get to work with good crews that have other departments that play nice with us. Not always the case, but for the most part, I would say the biggest thing is communication. If you're in the art department and you have a prop that you want to blink on a cue, maybe we need to get our hands on that prop before it's heading in front of the camera so we can do whatever wiring we need to do to it. Even 24 hours notice is super helpful. And most of the people I work with, they're pretty good about that. They'll look at the scripts and say, hey, we have this thing coming up, can you do something about that? And as you get on big, larger crews, they'll have what they call fixtures departments that will actually work with the art department to design that stuff on an ongoing basis. But that's just one example. Anything that's going to require power or lighting, even just having a little bit of a heads up, if you're planning on running a bunch of space heaters, for some tents, usually we're, and this is speaking to smaller budget productions, because you get onto a union TV show, we're going to have power, we're just going to drag it out, and it's not a big deal. But maybe on a bigger TV show, you have a 480 volt fan that's going to show up. Well, now we need to know about that ahead of time so we can plan for it. So anything that's out of the ordinary that you have coming up, you have some special piece of something coming in. Maybe if it has anything to do with us, let us know when and then we can all react accordingly.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
I was just going to say, talk a little bit about relationship between the electrics and the camera department and electrics and the grip department.
That depends on who you're working with. I've worked with some.
What are good ones and what are bad ones?
Good ones collaborate and work together. We don't have with the camera department. I've worked with some camera people who will, not. I'm trying to think of how to best say this. Some camera people you work with are very good at telling you what the frame lines are and where you can put lights and where you cannot put lights and what's going to be in the way physically of the dolly or of the camera, or and some people need are just constantly changing those lines. So what's helpful for us is for the camera to line the shot up, and then obviously things can tweak. It's not like you're set in stone, but also it's very, very helpful for us if once you've made a decision, it helps us make decisions, because then when you change your decision, we have to adjust. We're there to accommodate the camera. We're not there to get in the way of it. We're there to, make the image, and the camera does take precedence. But it's helpful for us when we know what parameters we're working within. And then as far as the working with a good grip department, again, it's all about collaboration. There's many ways to do what we do in this industry, and sometimes a good grip will have a better way of getting a light in a place than my original idea, and we'll be like, sure, light's still doing the same thing. Seems like a safer way to do it, or a faster way to do it, or both. So yeah, let's go for it. And on the flip side, if you have a grip crew who's nowhere to be found when the lights are getting rigged or when the cameras are getting in place, or whatever, it just slows the whole process down significantly. And oftentimes it'll fall back on us, even though we're waiting on another department. So, which gets quite frustrating.
Do you ever have any issues with sound?
Very rarely. The biggest issue we tend to have with sound is if we're working with incandescent lights and we dim them down a little too far, they'll start hearing the buzzing. Sometimes, there's always stuff that comes up. I've typically not had what I would consider to be issues. It's usually they're bringing up a rightful point. They're hearing something that's ruining the sound, so it's our job to
fix it.
Get in there and fix it.
Right.
Now, part of it, again, when I talk about planning, is the number one thing you can plan to make sure it's never an issue is where you put your generator. Don't put your generator right in front of the house, or sound is going to show up an hour. They're going to show up an hour after you've put all the stuff in, and they're going to be like, "What's that noise?" Just don't put it there. Put it around the corner. Run the extra cable. Don't be lazy. Now sometimes there's time constraints, and sometimes there's other factors involved. Permits or hillsides, fire lane. Sometimes there are issues that are. But for the most part, know that where you're putting, if you're putting equipment that creates a noise, put it away from where the microphones are. Biggest one of this is HMI ballasts. Don't bring your HMI ballast into the room of the set. Don't do it. Just put them around the corner, run your feeder cables in, and the sound department is going to be much, much happier with you. And then you won't have issues. So.
I got one from chat. Jonah wants to know, as the industry moves more towards LED-based sources and lighting panels on set, do you have any experience, or would you have any advice for anybody that wants to move into becoming qualified as a lighting programmer?
That is a great question, actually. If you can become a very skilled programmer, you will have a lot of work in this business. Everything is moving towards smart lights. Even on the little 5-person crews I work with, we're using wireless DMX. We're using wireless receivers. It just streamlines the process. Any studio-based job is going to be run back to a console. There's really only the smallest subset of jobs in this business are not using a console, or like daylight exterior stuff. Anything that's really involving any interior, whether it's on location or on studio, that's all being run back to a console. So if you want to position yourself very well, that is a good place to be. I feel like there could become what's interesting right now is speaking of programmers though, is we have a lot of people who want to be programmers and claim that they're programmers, but aren't that good. And I got burned by a guy doing this, who the guy I wanted wasn't available. The second guy I wanted, I booked him on the job, and then he ended up having to bail like the day before. And he's like, "Oh, my buddy who does concerts, he's gonna come do this." I'm like, "Okay, do you trust this guy?" And like, this was interesting because I sort of trusted the guy I was hiring, but the recommendation off a recommendation is always very iffy. And this particular programmer could not cut it at all. He had a 6-hour head. Like this is something I program a bit myself, but I don't market myself as a programmer, just because there are certain effects-based stuff that if I have prep time, I can knock it out. But if I'm asked to do certain things on the fly, I know that I cannot exceed to the expectation of certain people. So I just don't market myself as something that I'm not. That being said, I do know how to program, and I knew how to program better than the person I ended up hiring, who couldn't achieve anything I was asking him to do, even though I told him exactly in prep what we were doing. So it was me and the DP sitting there shaking our heads at like, why are the lights just flickering? It was excruciatingly painful.
Do you have any advice for somebody that wants to get into being a lighting programmer? Like, how did you learn what you know, and where's the place to get started with that?
Getting started as a programmer is easy right now during the pandemic. Actually, most of the console manufacturers have free classes online that'll show you kind of the basics and how to do certain things. You can also download all the major software. So EOS, HOG, and MA all have their software for free online that you can download and start playing with. If you don't have any lights to plug into it, you can download a visualizer so you can play with digital sets and just practice. I was very lucky in that the school that I went to had consoles. They were not necessarily for student use, but I happened to be working in the department that used them, and I would just kind of I would go in my free time and just turn the lights on and make them do things. And I would be like, what does this button on the console do? I'd read the instruction manual. Oh, that's how you do that. Go in.
Well, I remember running into you in that venue a couple times.
Yeah. So I mean, it's like, you read the user manual or read the forums and be like, how do you get the lights to do this? Learn what the syntax is for that. It's low-level coding, is what it is. It's kind of GUI based coding. So it's not hard to get into. It just takes practice, and it takes but what separates someone who can be a keyboard monkey and someone who can be a proper lighting console programmer on set is organization. Having your color palettes ready to go. When the gaffer calls for 3200, if you have a hotkey that sets the sky panels to 3200, you're going to look a lot better than someone who's typing the full command line out. Having groups set up, having plots. One of the other requirements, and this is the main reason I don't market myself as a programmer out here, is it's a pseudo requirement to know Vectorworks as a programmer, because a lot of the responsibility of lighting plots will actually fall to the lighting programmer.
Just to clarify, what is Vectorworks? Just in like 5 words.
It's like CAD, 3D CAD program essentially.
Okay.
One of the things I want to chime in on, Airy actually has some nice series on DMX, and so just a basic understanding of DMX, I think, is essential to everybody in the industry now. Just have an overview of it and get an idea on it. But Airy's got that up online. And there's some other good stuff to learn in this direction that's out there.
Yeah, on the larger sets, they're actually running a lot of Ethernet nodes around. It's not just a lot of sets. It's still maybe 1, 2, 3 universes of DMX getting run around the stage with opti splitters, but there's some sets that are now moving to full Ethernet rigs, and so then you have to have an understanding of not just DMX, but streaming ACN and ArtNet.
Yeah.
And networking protocols. And that's not just the programmer. That's, multiple people on the set.
Airy, I was really impressed. About 2 weeks ago, I stumbled on it, or I got an email from it. But Airy's got some tutorials on ArtNet and all of the whole deal, Ethernet and universes and DMX, and how all of that works together and involves. And it's a really good series.
Yeah, there's a lot of great resources out there, and there's a lot of stuff that you can be doing with data that's very helpful on the set. And as a department, it speeds things up tremendously. If I can, control, all the lights in the grid, without having to get up on a ladder to adjust every single one of them. That's a huge time savings, and time is
money.
Time is money, and you never have as much time as you need in this business.
Absolutely true.
If you tell somebody you need 20 minutes to do a job, they're going to ask you to do it in 15. So now I've got to find a way to do the same job in not enough time.
I got one more question for me. Can you walk me through in like 2-3 minutes, what does a typical day look like for you on a union set as a lighting technician? Like, where do you start? Where do you end? what's your call time and your wrap time in relation to, or in comparison to what everybody else does? What does that look like?
Okay, so yeah, so lately I've been working actually on a lot of the union stuff. I've been working more as a best boy. But for me, a typical day, it starts out. So my job as an assistant chief tech is to look at, speak with the gaffer and figure out what's our work like for the next day, or we had a new location, same location, whatever, and then I'll tell the production, hey, we need X amount of time, of a pre-call. And then that becomes a negotiation of, do we get the pre-call or not? Do they want to pay for it or not? That's a whole topic we could get into and talk for 2 hours. But so, I come in with, the crew, we'll unload the truck. We'll get the, the pre-built lights set up. If I know, sometimes we'll have to lay a cable rig in. Usually if you're first unit, you're usually not working with anything heavier than banded. Sometimes we do have to run 2-aught or 4-aught. I was on a job where we came in on a 2-hour pre-call and buried 4-aught on the beach. That was painful.
That doesn't sound fun.
But what we did for that,
what is 4-aught, just to clarify for people?
4-aught is the heaviest gauge of cable that we tend to work with. It weighs 100-foot stick of it weighs just under 100 pounds. So, and we had to run, what was it, like 350 feet of buried 4-aught. So we're burying several thousand pounds of cable.
How many wires? Was it like 3-phase, 5 wire kind of a thing?
Yeah, we ran. Yeah, we actually ran single phase to save a wire. So we were running 4 wire. We were trying to make it as bearable for the guys as possible. But the nice thing with that rig was that rig stayed in for a week and a half. So we buried it so that we didn't have to move it again.
Gotcha.
But usually we're not burying cable. Usually, most of the time, it would be a rigging crew. They would come in the day before, or several hours, many hours before us to do that work, and then they would go clean up a mess that we left behind the previous day, and that's where having a good rigging crew really saves the backs of everybody, because they can do some of the the non-artistic, I don't want to say that, because riggers do some really great stuff. Riggers are
very creative.
Yes, they are. They really are. So they work a different side of the set. First unit is working with the cameras. The riggers are doing all the prep. So that way, when first unit comes in, there's certain things we don't have to worry about. And I'm very grateful when I have a rigging crew. I haven't had a rigging crew in, I haven't been working for a couple months now. But yeah, it's always great when you have one. But so once we're in, back to first unit type stuff, you lay whatever, cable you got to move around, whatever. Then, the gaffer's in there on the set, the actors. If we have a pre-light that we have to do, we start throwing the lights up. And sometimes, we'll have me and the gaffer will a lot of times give me a plot, and I'll go around with the guys and be like, hey, you two guys work on this. You hop over here on this ladder. Let's get a cable drop going over here. You just kind of knock it out. But if it's kind of a more simple set, where you don't necessarily need a pre-light, or if, a pre-light's not going to help you, they'll tend to start with rehearsal, and while they're rehearsing, we're, prepping different things we think we might need. And then, gaffer will go in and he'll start calling for stuff. And then that just kind of starts the day. And then my job ends, when the truck closes. I don't, like, for the most part, I'm not sticking around, maybe much more than 10 minutes after any of the other guys to do paperwork. Most of the time I'm doing my paperwork. A lot of my paperwork I do digitally, so I can just be done when everybody else is done. But sometimes, like on Fridays, I'll have to stay for an extra 10, 12 minutes to, do final touches on time cards and that sort of thing.
Cool.
But
go ahead.
Oh no, go ahead.
I was just going to ask. We're going to wrap it up here in just a couple minutes, but what practices have you found to be most useful in developing yourself and growing yourself as a lighting technician in your field, in between gigs and that sort of thing? Because gigs. I know you said work was really solid last year, but what do you do on the in betweens to make sure you're keeping yourself sharp and make sure you're still developing?
Professionally, it's looking at new equipment that's coming out. If you can make it to any of the conventions, that's super helpful. Getting your hands on new stuff. Just talking to people, seeing what they're working with, asking questions. Just being like, hey, what was your workflow on this project? But yeah, I mean, so staying sharp is, at this point, it's a lot of it's keeping up with the technology of what's changing and how you can implement new tools to do things faster, to do things cheaper, to find different alternatives. And you can spend as much or as little time doing that as you care to, really. It all depends on kind of, I guess, what you're trying. It's not, you're not necessarily going to get the next job because you know the coolest tool. Like, that's not, this is a business about who you know and who likes working with you. And, obviously if you know nothing, you're not going to get hired. But if you're just some kid off the street who knows the entire ARRI catalog and every accessory that goes with the ARRI orbiter, that's not going to get you a job either. There is a balance between the two. And, but knowing what's out there is a important part of the job.
Cool. Doug, do you have any final questions before we wrap up?
Yeah. So what's one thing that you wish you had learned sooner?
One thing I wish I had learned sooner. Okay. Yeah. So I was thinking about this earlier. What's interesting is knowing who your friends are in this business. And I'm not saying your allies in production. I'm saying who your true friends are, because it's very easy for the lines to get blurred in this business with who you work with and who has your back when you need somebody. And they're two very different things. But when you spend 14 hours a day, 5 days a week with the same people, you can tend to think that those people are your friends, and vice versa. You can tend to think of many people you're not working with as, it's hard to differentiate between the two. I've gotten a lot better at it over the years. One of the tests I do tend to use is who are the people I still spend time with and talk to when I'm not working with them. That's been one way to differentiate. But, there's definitely people that I am currently working with who I consider to be good friends. And there's people on the same, spectrum, that I'm working with that I'll go hang out with them. They're fun people, but they're not my friend necessarily. But like, that was something that several years ago that hit me really hard. And it was something that, it's like, how do you identify that these people are your friends because they're actually your friends and not just because you're around them 80 hours a week by force of nature? That's a very interesting struggle.
This is a dangerous question for me to ask you, but I'm going to ask anyway.
Uh-oh.
Have you maintained friendships with folks back on the East Coast?
That was part of what got me through the struggle. Was I moved west and I found the people I was still talking to and continue to talk to now live 3,000 miles away. Now, I have some really great friends on the West Coast also, so they'll probably be the ones I call first when I'm in trouble because they can get there a little quicker.
Yeah, there's that.
But I've got some really, really great friends on the East Coast that I talk to almost at least once a week, if not, sometimes on the daily. So
cool, very cool.
Awesome. Well, so Mark, where can folks find you if they want to look at what you're up to? Do you have any projects you're working on, any side projects or anything like that? If you do, where can they find that? Otherwise, where can they find you on social media or any of that other stuff?
I'm not a very social media Not a super social media person, but you could follow my Instagram if you want to see some of my travel photos. It's just, I think it's Mark_Belcher or something like that.
I'll get it from you later, and I'll put it in the
Yeah,
description.
maybe John can post a link. So, but yeah, I mean, if you have questions or anything, I think that's probably a good spot. Anyway,
Okay.
you could just email me there or whatever, and
Email you on Instagram.
yeah, exactly. Well, it's funny. I keep up with people all over the world through a number of platforms, and I've got several Instagram chats. That's just the way I communicate with those people. They happen to they live in other countries, so
Yeah.
There's one buddy that this is totally tangential, but there's one buddy who I have a chat with in Facebook, WhatsApp, and Instagram, and we were joking about how that's just so confusing to follow.
Cool.
But yeah.
All right. Well, Mark, do you have any final thing you want to say? Any final notes for anyone?
No, this has been fun. Yeah, I mean, for anyone out there who's trying to get into this business, just biggest takeaway I can say is have fun with it. And, if you're not having fun,
you're doing something wrong.
You're doing something very wrong, and you're in for a lifetime of misery if you don't enjoy this. But if you do enjoy it, like I do, then you can't really imagine doing much else.
Cool. All right, sounds good. Well, Mark, thank you so much for joining us today. It was super interesting, super informative. Mr. Miller, thank you for joining me as co-host. Doug. Doug. Always appreciated. And thank you everybody for watching. Just so you guys know, we actually are on Spotify now. I finally got that set up, so that's pretty cool. So if you just search The False Stakes on Spotify, you will find us. You can listen to the audio versions of this and or any of the other podcasts that we've already done. Podcasts are usually posted about 24 hours after they get recorded on here, just so I can go in and fix some sound things and that sort of thing. But other than that, thank you guys for watching. We really appreciate it. This has been the False Takes, and it's a show about art and film and the mistakes we all make along the path to creating something new. We appreciate you watching, and hopefully we will see you next time.